what got you into starting Muzie.live, and tell us about it. What's the idea behind it? And
Ye-
yeah.
Yeah, it's a really cool story. So my dad, again, him and I run the business together. So that was more of an accident than sort of a planned thing. Me and him, as I said, we were playing music through my childhood. So naturally, as I went to college, I wanted to be, rock star, playing bands, all that fun stuff. But quickly I realized that I needed a, more pragmatic approach. So I started designing a practice app for college students. It was called I Want to Practice. And basically, the idea was that you could go onto the platform, create a routine based on all the stuff that we needed to work on for our classes and assessments. And then it would build a practice routine for you. Um, and then from there, you would be able to track all your practice history, all your stats, all that kind of stuff. And so we built out a prototype, and I was a part of one of the first startup lab classes at Berkeley. So that was really cool. It was a really neat opportunity. Berkeley partnered with MIT. So the two schools came together, and we had a class that was MIT professors and Berkeley professors. And the idea was to sort of encourage building startups and actual programs or companies. And so I was one of the only programs that actually had like a functioning, piece of software or something to move forward with. So fortunately for me, Berkeley actually took that on. They were the first sort of customer of ours. They liked the idea, and so it got used by the bass department and a couple of other areas of Berkeley. And that was really the thing that sort of got the whole thing rolling. And that's how my dad and I ended up doing this all together, because basically he built it as a, sure, let's see if your little idea might be something. And then that kind of rolled into a bigger thing. And then we ran that for 4 or 5 years. And that was a really cool program. It grew out into tons of practice features, tons of lesson management features. It was really neat, but we started realizing it was getting a little over bloated, too many things, and it was sort of losing its direction. So we started building a couple of different other apps. Some of them were things that you could play and it would listen to you and give you feedback sort of autonomously. And then Muzie, which was supposed to be a tutoring service where people could come online. And then the idea was kind of Uber for music teachers. Basically, what we wanted is you could get onto the platform at any time, and then you could have students requesting lessons, and you could just grab a student in real time and then do the lesson. And basically, as long as that lesson was running, the student was paying you by the minute. So the student had control over all the length of lessons and all that kind of stuff. It was a really unique model, but we launched that January 2020. So basically, we did that for, I don't know, a week or two. And all of the teachers that signed up in the beta period the year before and sort of in that first month, we're like, this is really cool. And then of course we got the lockdown order, and they were like, okay, we don't really care so much anymore about getting new students. We need an environment for our students. And that was sort of the thing that really made Muzie what it is today. And that was probably February 1st or something of 2020. So everyone was just trying to figure out what to do. But once we made that switch, it sort of took off from there. And ever since, we've been building out. Really, it was lucky for us, the audio, video, all of the online hosting, all that stuff was already in place for the tutoring system. So none of that was different, luckily. And then we were just building out tools and features sort of for the students and teachers to really make online lessons more comprehensive and more interesting. And then more recently, we've been working with AI and assignments and things to build out more interesting environment for in-person and hybrid lessons as well. So it's sort of grown into a whole nother thing now.
Wow, very interesting. I love that the pandemic was kind of had the silver lining for you. And
Yeah.
uh, so did you discover something uniquely, some unique capability that's possible through the online environment, versus traditional in-person lessons? So is it just in-person translated onto online, or do people take advantage of the fact that it's online to do things you can't do in live?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest, the most obvious thing people can do online, without even really needing anything like Muzi or anything more specific, is just group lessons. I know so many teachers who couldn't do group teaching because of like a physical limitation. Like my
Mhm.
studio here, probably only big enough for 2, 3 people, maybe. And so if you really wanted a group of students in here, that really wouldn't be practical. So I'm either going to need to buy a new house, which not going to happen, or I have to rent out a studio, which probably not going to happen either. It just, so if I can do it online, then I can maximize income without even changing anything about my current business. So we do a lot of sort of teaching on how to grow as a studio. So if you're teaching and you're not doing group classes, that's the first thing that I always suggest. And if you're not sure how to get into it, the first step that everybody can take, and this is also a great sort of add-on to your business that really doesn't take any effort on your own end, is adding in 1 hour practice sessions, group practice sessions each week. And so what you can do is you can now offer a package to your students that might be, hey, if you want to do, lessons, you can do, one every week, but you can do lessons plus for, maybe $50 more. That gives you 4 more hours of lessons technically if you show up to any of these group practice sessions. As a teacher, it's a great way of getting extra income. It also has a way of sort of creating a tiered system of pricing so people can feel like they're getting a premium product from you. And then it also, as a teacher, gives you an hour a week to sit down and practice. And if the students don't show up, you benefit financially, so that's fine. If the students do show up, it's fantastic practice to start with group teaching. You might have 2 students come in, ask completely different questions. Now you can learn sort of a really, in a low pressure environment, how to engage both questions at the same time, how to sort of, bring them together and, have the students sort of learn from each other and everything of that nature. So that's what, and Muzi is built full of tools that sort of help facilitate all of that as well. But that is sort of my first general thing about online that, I think anybody can do. So, yeah.
So do the teachers also learn from each other if they're on the platform? Does it become like a community of, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
educators?
so we have a Facebook community that we do all that through. It's sort of the hub of everything that we do at Muzi. All of our teachers, or a big chunk of the teachers, are in there, especially the really active ones. And that's where all of the sort of learning from each other happens, engaging with each other, asking questions or showing different teaching methods. That's sort of the environment that we've created. We don't, inside Muzi itself, teachers don't really interact with each other, although we are working on a new marketplace feature, which will have resources for teachers to sort of to access, as far as professional development and things of that nature. So that will sort of become a community area as well. But the Facebook group has been a fantastic sort of area to leverage something that's a pretty ubiquitous platform, but in a more effective way. So
Mhm. How many people are in the Facebook community?
about 500 teachers in the
Oh,
Facebook
wow.
group,
That's
I
great.
think, and then there's thousands of teachers on Muzi, and as a whole, and tens of thousands of students. So the community is quite large. Just as it's constantly growing. Knock on wood. We've been really, I hate to say lucky with the pandemic because it's such a weird phrase, but like you said, it sort of is the silver lining. So that was the thing that kind of boosted Muzi forward, and now we've been sort of got the momentum. And like I said, as we're tapping into sort of newer technologies and things that are applicable to both in person and online, that's sort of how Muzi's kind of staying relevant for teachers that might not still love the online thing. But that's still our bread and butter. Online is really, 90% of what Muzi does.
Speaking of marketplace, does it serve as a marketplace for music teachers? So if I'm a student, I'm looking for a certain type of music teacher, can I go and browse and search Muzi and find the right teacher?
Not yet. So that's something we've kind of had, because that is the original intent with Muzi. We, for a little while, we did have both things running, and it just caused confusion. And there is a pretty there's like a concern teachers bring up pretty often, and it's probably valid. I don't know if
Mhm,
it is or isn't, but it's the idea that if you're bringing your students to the
mhm,
platform,
mhm.
there's an avenue for them to leave and find another teacher.
Right.
That feels a little
Sure.
unsettling.
Sure.
So we focus most of what Muzi does on development for the teachers, so that teachers have access to resources that they can then provide to students. So, but Muzi is chock full of tools for students as well. There's practice features for the students. There's assignments that they can do. There's interactive recordings. As far as creating things, one of my favorite things we have is clips. It's a great way for students to practice songwriting, duets, solos, recordings. And basically, the idea is that you have sort of like how this is set up, in the sense you can record something, you get a window, and then you can record something else, you get another window, you can record something else, you get another window. And those are all layered on top of each other and synchronized. So when you hit play, they'll all play back together. So you can record track 1, track 2, track 3, and then you can play back and you can visually see yourself. The neat thing too is teachers can make tracks and send them to students, and then the students can record their tracks on top. Um, or students, even that's something that's collaborative between students. So if you have a group project, students can all get in there together and can all record their own part. So you could have a group band or something that all gets in and everyone records, and it's all synchronized up to the main track. So that's a pretty fun way for students to be able to do both duets online, things like that, but also a really creative environment, especially for composition needs. I
Mhm.
found it really fun for practicing songwriting and being able to sort of get your ideas down, and then you can move over to the whiteboard or something else where you can actually annotate or notate what it is you're doing. We also have MIDI instruments, so you can always play what you're working on, and it will transcribe the piece that you're working on into sheet music. So all of that kind of stuff baked into Muzi sort of makes it somewhat of a hub for the practice side of things as well for students. And then we've got badges and awards and stickers and things like that. And those are a lot of fun. Honestly, I always say the young students enjoy those, but that's not true. It's definitely my adult students who pick out of those. So I don't know, but they are fun.
Yeah. Well, you brought up composition, and of course, composition is what we're all about with Hyperscore. And I guess given, how you've seen your ecosystem of teachers and students function, um, w- where would you see something like Hyperscore kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the cool thing about what you're doing is it's a low barrier to entry, so people can get in. You don't. It's the great for beginner students, people who are just getting into composition for the first time. A lot of what Muzi's offering natively sort of implies some kind of experience with the instruments or some kind of understanding of notation. So until you're there, it's a little bit like, okay, now what do I do? So where Hyperscore comes in is it bridges that gap, and we have a lot of young students on the platform, especially first timers too. I don't think age really is the barrier. It's more on the experience and understanding of what you're doing there. And then basically the way we see Muzi is sort of the hub where everything occurs. Sort of the way we design the platform is to allow for add-ons as we go. So the idea there is that as you're teaching, so you can imagine you're in an environment like this, but you have tabs that you can access that are Muzi tools or other tools. Hyperscore is a perfect fit in that sense of you could have a tab there and it has the windows for all the interactive, instruments and things that you and your students can be looking at. It also, if you're doing a group lesson, you can have sort of the whole ensemble can be created by all the students doing their own thing. That's very much aligned with how Muzi works. So like with our whiteboard, you can either have a private whiteboard where every student is just doing their own thing, or you can have a public board where everyone's collaborating together. And so, but we don't have any kind of playback or anything. It's just a visual board where what you've got is sort of that next layer. Students can get in there, they can move things around. It gives them that first sort of graphical understanding. They can physically move things to get an idea of how melody works. you can draw the lines, you can create the beats. I think, and then of course learning the actual idea of composition, of layering instruments, and not just having one module. You can have multiple modules and you can be creating things a loop. I think it's a little bit like the clips idea, where it's a simple way of bringing in a complex concept. Like with our clips, it's a very simple interface of doing multi-layered recording. As you know, if you use like Logic, Pro Tools, or something of that nature, that can be very daunting on first sight. You're just like, oh boy, what do I click? Where do I go? With clips, it's layer, record, layer, record, layer. And I feel like you've got a very similar sort of environment and message going from Hyperscore of, you have this complex program that, under the hood, there's a lot going on there, but interface wise is very simple. It's something that allows anyone of any skill level to get in there and start creating. And that's really the mission at the end of the day. Personally, as a teacher, my thing is getting students to write their own songs. That's always my sort of initial mission. I mean, I may be different or something, but for me, I don't love the idea of just teaching songs over and over again. It's fine to know songs, and it's good to get to learn how to write songs and that kind of thing, but I'm always pushing my students to early on to write something original right away, and that way they have something that they can sort of jump right into, and that sort of sinks their teeth into the idea of like, okay, this is fun, it's creative, and I can do my own thing. And or I can go and learn these things, and that's where you get the building blocks from. So I definitely think that composition is a pretty vital aspect to the education sort of toolkit.
That's great. I think that's relatively unusual among
Yeah,
teachers, I think, who teach instrumental or, theory and so on. So, um, that's cool. So, actually, I'm just thinking, like, is there a way that we can kind of introduce or mentor teachers who might want to learn about Hyperscore in the music community? Is there something we could do to, I
yeah,
mean, we could do, like a group
yeah,
composing
yeah.
work or, various things like that. But
Absolutely, yeah. But our Facebook group is a great way of doing something like that. With any kind of workshop, especially over the summer, teachers are always looking for something
uh-huh.
they're sharpen their teeth on. I was just talking to a bunch of teachers about this, and that's sort of the whole point behind our resource center that we're working on,
Uh-huh.
is providing teachers with workshops, podcasts, educational tools, resources, anything that sort of allows you to either learn a new skill or learn a new piece of technology, or even just have a discussion about something. So we do webinars where we have, we'll host a guest, and then people can come on, and then this community can ask questions and do it live like that. Or we do things where, if you have a workshop, you can just get on and do the workshop, and there's people, that can either be live or record it and post it to all the groups and whatnot. Yeah, and I think that kind of thing is vital. That's the one thing that we're always looking to sort of expand on, because I think, as everyone knows, once you get out of college, it's sort of, okay, now what? How do I actually build a business? How do I be a solo entrepreneur? How do I be a music teacher? How do I effectively, sort of do what I need to do to make it as, a business? And that, at the end of the day, is what it is. And being a good teacher is sort of the central point of that. So, those are the things that I think teachers always appreciate, having access to more resources of that nature. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, well, we should definitely talk about that some more. On your Facebook group, do you do like Facebook Live? Is that how you do it with?
Yeah, we do a whole bunch of different things. We've done the Facebook Live stuff. That's usually the best way to get to people. And then we have an audience, and then you can have the questions and answers, and you can have the back and forth. And that's can be a lot of fun too. Just because the teachers always have something that pops up that you don't really think of. And then the other thing is that if you have we have it streamed to multiple different areas, so you can put it on YouTube and the Facebook group at the same time. So anyone that might not be in the group can just be accessing it, and they can still partake in all the fun. And then yeah, it's then later chop it up and turn it into shorts on
Yeah.
YouTube, so everyone's got access to the content. But it's a lot of fun. We've done quite a few of them. The teachers, said anything that's a resource of educational value, I think that the community as a whole is always looking for.
Well, that would be fun. I think we'd love to do that, and so we'll follow up with you about that. So do you have any questions for us about Hyperscore at this
Yeah,
point?
well,
Yeah.
I know that you spent a lot of time and effort, bringing this over to the cloud, and that's sort of a big part of modern technology is, keeping it up to date, modernizing it, all that. Always curious about the process of sort of taking something that has been pretty well established and then converting it to sort of the new era of tech, but keeping sort of the feel and everything. And I'm sure there's a lot of decisions in what to provide and what not to, but yeah, it's a pretty impressive job too. So good work on that.
Well, this is Peter's
Yeah.
domain, so I'll let
Um,
you speak.
I think that for the initial rollout of the web-based version, we wanted to keep it pretty close to what we know works and what's been successful for so long and what teachers who have been using it would be familiar with. There's a few tweaks that we did that were enhancements, and then just the design refresh given feedback that we've gotten, and also to accommodate the broader range of devices that we're
Right.
supporting. Tablet devices, you got to make your buttons a little bit bigger and things like that. So there was a fair amount of thought in that, but in terms of core functionality, it was really just taking what the existing product and rewriting it for the web. Moving forward now, though, that we've done that, we're thinking about what are the next steps, what are the next features, and we've had lots of feature requests over the years, but thinking about how would we integrate with a Muzie-like platform, or how can we facilitate the kind of collaboration that you're already doing on your platform with what we have, and I think that we're at a point now where we're thinking about what are those next.
Absolutely. I mean, that's
Evolution.
fantastic, right?
Mhm.
And those are the hardest questions. Is Musie's going through a similar thing right now where we just did a big survey, got all the data back, and basically everyone was like, "We love it, refine it, and just make it easier and better to use." And you're like, "Okay, cool." You're like, okay, how do we actually do that? You're like, all right, let's start cutting these out. Do we need that? Where does this go? It's all the little details that come down at the end. But I say, fantastic job of bringing it over to the web app side of thing, making it touch friendly. All of that is obviously incredibly complicated, I guess. And now, as you're saying, it's sort of the pool of suggestions is, what do we do next? How do we engage with the audience or the users and the students and create a product that is something they need?
Right, and we've got like a collection of requests going back 10, 15 years, but those may not be the things that are most important right now with where teachers are, where students are. So like, reaching out to people like you and the teachers that you work with and finding out what is necessary or what can we afford or offer that maybe teachers haven't thought about yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm always hearing that for us, just based on the nature of our work, is that collaborative nature of any kind of software. Is something where multiple people can either be working on the same thing at the same time, or multiple people have access to the same document or creation. A Soundtrap is a good example of something that sort of stepped up the bar of what people sort of can do now. And what you guys are doing, I think, is a fantastic sort of introductory level of that sort of thing, of, like we're saying, not having the full crazy DAW workstation thing, but having all of the necessary tools available to you, and still having an environment that is allowing for that collaboration. Muzie, that's sort of the main focus of almost everything we're doing. Is how do you create, and it's a little bit like going back to your question earlier, June, is do we mimic real life lessons and slap that online, or do we create something new? And I guess we try our best to mimic real life as best we possibly can. Fortunately, it then allows us to create things that we never really expected. But the first thing we do think of when creating is, okay, if I was in person, how would I do this? Like if it's something as simple as file sharing and I give you a folder and it's full of stuff. Okay, well, how do I mimic that digitally? Okay, you fill the folder, you send the folder. Okay, cool. It's like then when you're doing like an interactive whiteboard, it's okay, in real life, the student will probably have their piece of paper and they draw, the teacher would have their piece of paper and they draw. There might be a situation where the teacher draws on their paper. Okay, and then you sort of, okay, but with online, we can do this and this and this. And you start to really think about the new capabilities, and it's a pretty awesome situation.
And I played around with the Muzie a bit over the past couple of weeks, and that's kind of one of the things that struck me about it compared to some other things that I've seen, is that it does feel like you're in a shared space, and that these tools and features are just around and you can pull them in when you need to. It's not like you're switching to a different program every time you want to do something different. It's very much
Yeah,
an
exactly.
environment where you can,
Exactly. And that's how I see working with products like Hyperscore, is that idea of like the tab-based system of making it just so accessible that while you're doing the main thing, which is teaching, you have immediate access to the resources that make that teaching more effective. At the end of the day, the tools are not the focus. As much as I love the tools, as I love building stuff, I love playing with the trinkets. And as you know, it's too much fun with all, the potential of what you can do. But at the end of the day, do you serve the lesson, or do you serve the education, or do you serve the student? And often, like what we're doing at Muzie, that means down and pulling away things that might not really work, or might not just, it might be bloat, or might just be cool idea but not functional, and that's the kind of stuff that once we really, and it's a never ending process, so you can't really ever finish that, but as you continuously do that, you build a more refined product. And that, as I was saying, Muzie sort of acts like the sort of hub of where the education's happening, just by the nature of the portal of being online and everything. And then tools like Hyperscore become part of your assignment, part of your classroom, part of your sort of practice and creative space. So it's a really neat opportunity, and just as far as technology going forward, there's a lot that can be done.
I think one of the things that excites us now, I mean, there's plenty to do with the technology, and it was a huge milestone when Peter got it all running so beautifully in the cloud. But is also innovating in the pedagogy. Like it opens up a whole area, like teachers working with young children never really considered teaching composition. So what can you do? What's possible when you take away some of those barriers? And, so, we have ideas about that. We have, one of the early people working on Hyperscore did a whole PhD on, inverted pedagogy, how you can start with just the creative process, exploring sounds, and then backing into, well, what did you just do? And have what can you do with what you've just done, and so on, and building understanding of music concepts by starting with the creative act. And but we'd be really excited to just put it out there to a bunch of teachers and let them get really creative with how they use it. So
it's really funny the way you described that. Funnily enough, reminds me of how most guitar lessons go, but I don't think people think of it this way. So it's not really applied in the way that you're talking of. Most of the time, or I guess like I said, maybe it's just me, but I like to sort of see my students messing up and doing creative things and playing just sort of whatever, and then explaining later on, like, okay, that was part of the major scale, but don't worry, doesn't matter, just do the thing again, it sounded cool. Like, there's something cool about having them just sort of learn the skills and learn the sounds and have fun with the thing. And like I said, I think that's sort of the nature of what gets people more interested in doing the instruments and actually learning, instead of just the idea of like, okay, here's your scale, play it, here's your metronome. It's like, that's fine. And once you get to a certain point, that's all necessary. But once you just get in the door, you don't really want to be like, okay, here's sight reading level 1. It's more like, okay, let's make something happen, play the instrument, make some noise, let's see what this thing does. And then we'll go back and we'll talk about, why did that make that noise? Why do these chords work together? And it's funny because I think in a guitar lesson that's like obvious almost, but in composition it doesn't seem to get the same treatment. It gets, and it just, I know from just my own experience, and especially going through college level stuff as well, that even there it goes through a much more rigorous sort of straightforward.
Learn the
Yeah,
things you have
exactly.
to
Right.
assemble then to make a composition instead of
Exactly,
doing it
exactly.
backwards. Yeah.
Right. So I think that's a great example. And so that sort of thing about breaking the down to get to the composition side straight away, just get to the creation side, get the juices flowing, let the students be happy and have fun, and then take a minute and go, okay, well, what we did there, why the melody went up or why this did or didn't sound good is because, and then that's the teacher's job as always. That's when you step in and do your thing. And as we were saying, with any piece of technology, it should be the thing that facilitates the learning, but it shouldn't get in the way, and it shouldn't be the focus of the learning. It should just be the thing that allows it to actually happen. And I think that's how you guys have integrated the tools, is exactly that.
Yeah. That process of getting very immediate feedback so that you can make a decision based on what you heard and how you respond to it.
Yeah.
And then evolve that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
A much more natural way of sort of evolving the musical taste.